Hi, this is Jonathan Rosenhead, Jerusalem psychotherapist. This week's Torah and Psychology post for Parashat Shemini is titled Silence in the Face of Tragedy. Aaron and Shevet Kahuna have just finished the inauguration process, the period where they start to enter into their role as Kohanim, and they've just started to perform the Avodah. It's probably the happiest day in Aaron's life. But suddenly in one moment tragedy strikes, and he goes from one emotional extreme to the other, from happiness to sadness, as he hears the tragic news that his sons Nadav and Avihu have been killed. And what is interesting is how the Torah reports Aaron's response to this tragedy. The pasuk says, "Vayidoim Aaron," that Aaron was silent. And what does it mean, silent? Silence in the face of tragedy. So I'd like to focus on two contrasting views. One is Rashi. Rashi says that this silence signifies an internal peace, that Aaron was able to accept what had happened. And this is reflected in the psychological research into mindfulness, that sees silence as a therapeutic tool to develop and find emotional peace. But in contrast, the Abarbanel says that this silence does not represent internal peace, but rather internal turmoil, that Aaron was now in a state of post-traumatic stress disorder, that the silence was speechlessness, that Aaron was not able to express in words the emotional turmoil that he was experiencing. And this is represented in the research into PTSD that sees that the area of the brain, Broca's area, which is responsible for language, is inactive when a person is in a state of PTSD. They are not able to generate any verbal expression for what they are experiencing. So when a person is silent in the face of tragedy, there isn't necessarily a behavioral response or a verbal response, but they are still thinking. There's cognitive processing, and we can say that they enter into a state of rumination. Rumination is a method for coping with negative emotions, negative mood, by self-attention. And the research differentiates rumination into two different components. One is reflective pondering, and the other is brooding. And this distinction represents a maladaptive and an adaptive response to a negative emotion or emotional difficulties. Because this reflective pondering is when a person engages in directed cognitive problem solving, that they're able to try to process the negative emotions that they are experiencing. Whereas pondering is when a person engages in a passive process, where it highlights and accentuates the emotional turmoil, the negative emotions they are experiencing, and exacerbates their mood. So we see two contrasting ways of understanding rumination, and this reflects the two different views of Rashi and the Abarbanel. This reflective pondering is the silence of Rashi, and the brooding component is the silence of the Abarbanel. So I wish you a good Shabbos, and keep well.